Israel enters the last quarter of this year in a corridor that is narrowing on three fronts: markets, law, and legitimacy, with allies divided on how hard to push and adversaries newly coordinated. Brussels has finally put concrete measures on the table. The European Commission has proposed suspending tariff preferences under the EU-Israel Association Agreement and targeting extremist ministers with sanctions. The package is politically fragile, yet it signals a step change. The Commission is prepared to translate human rights clauses into trade penalties. Even if member states dilute or stall the plan, the direction of travel is clear, and the Commission has already moved to pause some bilateral support that doesn't require unanimity. Expect more national measures from Madrid, Brussels, and others if the Council deadlocks. A recognition cascade now looks imminent. London, Paris, Ottawa and Canberra have all flagged or scheduled the recognition of Palestinian statehood around the UN General Assembly. This does not by itself resolve borders or security, but it reframes the conflict from an open-ended process to an overdue statehood file. And the diplomatic price for blocking an horizon for Palestinians is rising, including in G7 capitals that historically shielded Israel. The ICC warrants for the Prime Minister Netanyahu and the former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant have survived an attempt to withdraw them. This constrains travel, complicates summitry, and chills some forms of cooperation even among friends. Parallel UN findings on famine and atrocity risks have hardened the evidentiary environment. The cumulative legal architecture makes it harder for third states to argue business as usual without domestic challenge. Europe is Israel's largest trading partner by share. Even partial suspension of preferences would be economically modest in the short term, but reputationally large. Procurement screens, investment committee hesitations, and research consortia exclusions tend to follow politics with a lag. Watch universities, cultural bodies, and sports. Spain has called for excluding Israel from major competitions, and boycotts in those arenas often move faster than cabinets. The Saudi-Pakistan Mutual Defence Pact formalises years of quiet security alignment and is being read regionally as insurance against volatility after the strike in Doha. Qatar is signalling it will test legal avenues at the ICC. None of this creates an anti-Israel military bloc, but it underscores a Gulf posture that is less reliant on Washington and more willing to coordinate horizontally. That reduces Israel's room to leverage bilateral Gulf ties while the Gaza war continues. This gives us about 5 strategic implications for Jerusalem. As long as figures like Ben Gvir and Smotrich remain central, Europe will keep the sanctions gun on the table. A different composition of government would not dissolve criticism, but it would split the coalition arrayed against Israel and give partners political cover to re-engage. Once the UK, France, Canada and Australia move to recognise Palestine, further recognitions from EU and OECD middle powers will be easier. The price for stalling a ceasefire, therefore, will be paid not only in UN votes, but in visas, grants and cultural access. That is the logic of isolation by 1,000 administrative acts. The ICC exposure changes the calculus for visits, bilateral exercises, and even quiet intelligence meetings in Rome. In the Rome Statute states expect more virtual formats, fewer photo ops, cancellations that are officially blamed on scheduling, and the legal climate will also deter some defence industrial joint ventures in Europe. The famine confirmation is a hinge event. If aid flows to northern Gaza, if these flows remain episodic and restricted, European politics will harden further. If Israel can enable sustained corridors with third-party monitoring, some pressure will ease quickly, even before a full political settlement. Washington remains the indispensable backstop, but even a friendly administration cannot make partners immune from their courts, their parliaments and their streets. The more Europe and the Commonwealth align on recognition and targeted measures, the less room the US has to ask them to hold fire indefinitely. A sustained ceasefire plus monitoring Aid access reduces European heat. The Commission's package is parked. National sanctions plateau, and recognition proceeds, but is framed as leverage for renewed talks. That is the least costly path. If there is no ceasefire, episodic aid, continued ground operations, Brussels might stall, but capitals will act. Boycotts will spread in culture and sport. Some research exclusions might bite, and Israel will compensate by deepening Asia and Africa trade, but costs will rise quietly rather than catastrophically. That is fragmentation with attrition. A major incident with mass civilian harm or an open move on West Bank annexation. And remember that the President of Israel assured the Pope that there would be no annexation, no long-term settlement in Gaza. But if there is a move, a further move, this could trigger the Council Unity for partial suspension, wider visa bans, procurement blacklists, travel for indicted leaders becomes impractical across most of Europe. That remains, at the moment it remains avoidable, but the threshold is lower than a year ago. What would change the forecast is a verifiable, durable ceasefire with hostage releases and scaled humanitarian access, a cabinet reshuffle that marginalises extremist actors who are obvious targets for EU listings, and a credible political horizon with partners empowered to speak for Palestinians in a post-war order tied to recognition milestones already announced. Israel still has influential friends and real leverage. What is different now is that Europe has begun to convert condemnation into instruments. The recognition map is shifting from south to north, and the law is no longer abstract. The corridor is not yet closed, but it is narrowing. Choices in the next 90 days on ceasefire and access for aid, on political signals, will decide whether Israel walks out of it or is squeezed by it.